In the area in which I live, for some reason, there are fairly frequent power outages through the summer, especially anytime a thunderstorm or any winds come through. Must be a susceptible area somewhere in the local ComEd distribution system, I'm guessing. And they haven't fixed it, and for the last 14 years I've had this Briggs Stratton 6,000 watt job site generator, which I've connected to my house's circuit breaker panel using a transfer switch. And that's all been well and good. This is actually a really good product, very reliable, starts easily, runs well, powers the whole house, no problems whatsoever, except that it's extremely loud. And also it takes a mighty pull to get it started, even though usually one pull is sufficient. And I'm getting older, and it's getting harder, and I worry about screwing up a shoulder or something. So I decided to spend a little money and get an easier to start, quieter generator. The old generator had a continuous capacity of 6,000 watts with the ability to handle 7,500 watts of peak or surge. The nearest offering from Honda in this series was the so-called EU7000iS, which is rated for 7,000 watts, although it's not real clear from their documentation if that's supposed to be continuous or peak or surge or whatever, but I figured it would be adequate. While there were one or two other possibilities in approximately the right wattage range, they were disqualified because they did not have a 240 volt capability. They were purely 120 volt only, with no really good provision for powering a whole house with the normal center neutral and then two legs of 120 volts each. I would have had to use probably extension cords or rig up something different, something kludgier, probably less safe than what I already had. And so I had to restrict my search to units that had a dedicated 240 volt 30 amp socket compatible with the system I already had, and that was this unit. All right. Huh. So I would say this is sort of running at a conversational level. It's not a roar, I don't have to talk over it. I'm just speaking in a normal voice here, and we'll see how it comes out on the video, but it's definitely way quieter than the huge amount of racket that came out of that one. Now if you open up these side panels, it gets a lot noisier. So I'm going to give a quick or fairly quick overview of the control panel and some of the other features of this generator. The generator actually has two power generation circuits. Each one produces 120 volts, and they can be connected in two ways, either the so-called 120 volt only mode or in the 120 volt 240 volt mode. The latter is just like the normal power coming into a residential structure with three wires, if you will, the center one being neutral, and then the outer ones being the two legs, 120 volts each, just again like the power coming into a house. And so the two power generation circuits are connected in series, with the center point between them being what we'd call neutral, and then the two 120 volt legs, which between them adds up to 240 volts. So that's the 120 volt slash 240 volt mode. But to get double the power, you can actually connect both of those 120 volt generation circuits in parallel, and then you just get 120. It's not useful for powering your house, but you could have a lot of tools plugged into the receptacles on the generator and get more oomph out of it at 120 volts only. So you have a choice, but for my application, the 120 240 volt mode is the optimal. There's an electronic controller that runs everything on the generator. It's much more sophisticated than the traditional generators, and I don't know if it actually has a computer in it. Probably does, but that entire thing is turned on and off with a switch which has a removable knob that uses a key element, so you can't just stick any old thing in there. Therefore it's a locking switch, and they give you two of them, so you can have one and give the other to somebody else, or put one in a storage somewhere. Anyway, everything turns on and off with this one switch with the removable knobs. So here's the left side of the control panel. Right above the main switch and the engine start push button is the so-called eye monitor, which is a 5-mode LCD display with backlighting and a waterproof push button switch, which allows you to cycle through the 5 different modes that the display can be in. There's a little key right above it showing you what the modes are. There's a left window in the display, which can be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. That shows you the mode number, and then the larger window to the right shows you the value that's being measured. Mode 1 is the total runtime of the generator, and that's useful for maintenance if you want to keep track of, you want to do an oil change every so often, or spark plug maintenance. So that's just a constantly incrementing display that counts in hours, up to 5 digits, I think. And then mode 2 is to show the VA or volt amps, which is equivalent to wattage that the generator is currently putting out. It's not an ultra precise measurement, but it's good enough to give you a general idea of how hard it's working. And you can compare that to the 7,000 watts or VA that it's capable of. Mode 3 shows you the motor or engine RPM. Mode 4 shows the current battery voltage measurement. And Mode 5 shows you the control computer's best estimate on how much runtime you have remaining based on its measurement of the remaining fuel in the tank and the current loading of the generator. So it takes a crack at estimating, based on the current reading, how much longer it'll run before you need to put gas in it. Here's the right side of the control panel. Those three yellow and green things in the upper left are the three electrical points, safety insulated, very much like multimeter test equipment test leads, the way they're set up. There's a connector which plugs in to those 3 points. If you buy the optional accessory that allows connecting 2 of these generators together to run in tandem, so it handles the coordination of that through those 3 points, but those are not actually controls, they're actually electrical contacts. And then there's the eco throttle, which is a mode that allows you to save some gas, especially if you're at a job site where you have it hooked up to various power tools maybe, and they're not always running. When the generator detects that there's no load, or a light load, whatever, I'm not sure the exact details of its operation, but with light or no loading, it allows the engine to run at a lower RPM and save some gas, and then return to normal operating speed when it detects that there's a load or an increased load. That's fine if you just have a job site and you're just picking up power tools, running a circular saw for a minute at a time, that type of thing. But if you're hooking it up, for example, to run your whole house, you don't really want it in that mode. It would play havoc with the power going to the house, so you want to turn that eco throttle mode off if you're using it in that way. There are 4 receptacles. The left-hand one is a 120 volt 30 amp type, so it's a twist lock kind. You plug it in and you twist it to lock it. That could be useful for certain things, although in my view that's probably the least useful one on here. The one on the far right is a 240 volt 30 amp type. These are the most common on transfer switches for residential wiring, and also on generators that are set up to be used for powering houses in emergency situations. So that is a 4-pin or 4-prong twist lock type, and again it's a standard type, so it's commonly used for that type of application. Then the 2 middle ones are identical 120 volt duplex receptacles, and depending how you've got the voltage switch set, these 4 outlets get connected in various ways to the 2 power generating circuits. It's described pretty well in the manual. Each of the receptacles has a sort of elastomeric lid over it that flips up, hinged at the top, and you can grasp it from the bottom. And they are basically dust and water shields to keep the outlets or the receptacles clean and dry, and they can clearly keep water pretty well off of these if it's outside and it rains, for example. But I wouldn't call them waterproof, but they're pretty good splash diverters and dust covers, and they're embossed, if you will, with the pattern that matches the type of receptacle, so you don't have to lift them up to see what's behind them. Each of the receptacles has its own circuit breaker. The 3 left ones have push-button type circuit breakers, where the buttons are pushed in when the circuit breaker is closed, and they pop out visibly so when the circuit breaker trips. And those 3 have their buttons surrounded by a flexible elastomeric dust and water shield, so they're essentially waterproof, or splash proof anyway. And then the 240 volt one just has a toggle switch type circuit breaker. You can see the black lever there for that. Kind of hard to see at the lower left hand corner of this picture is the CO monitor. That's carbon monoxide. So if this gets used in a place where carbon monoxide from the engine exhaust were to build up around the generator, it's detected, and when it crosses a certain threshold, then it alarms on here, and if the situation isn't soon rectified, it'll actually shut the engine off automatically to stop generating any more carbon monoxide, that is. Here's the eye monitor. This is time running. It has a picture of an hourglass. It's display mode 1. Currently it hasn't even run 1 hour. Go to mode 2, VA, essentially watts. Currently 19,200. It's capable of 7,000 watts. RPM, currently sitting at 3,300 RPM. Battery is checking at 12.5 volts. It's charging. And it's showing that the gas tank is full. It's not in gallons. The display is supposed to be an indication of how many hours approximately you could run given the amount of gas you have. This is with the shop vac and a couple of power tools running in the basement. Alright, here's a engine start, and I've got this inside the garage just enough that it's dark enough you can see the backlight on the display, but the exhaust is blowing out doors there. So I'm going to turn the switch on. You can see the backlight came on. Maybe not. Let's turn it off again. Switch on. You can see the backlight. Display's reasonably clear. Push the start button. And we get indication that it's making power.